So welcome everybody to panel two panel two is Cultural Heritage Networks and Participation. So my name's Ben, I'm moderating this panel and we're going to start with Beatrice Bersani, who's based at the University of Edinburgh, and she did an exchange with the University of Toulouse-Jean, Jaurès in France, and the title of her presentation is The Colours of the Ancient Gods Between Poetry and Network Analysis. So over to you, Beatrice.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, for the kind presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Let me just know if you can see it. Does it work? Yeah, great, thank you. Sagda gave me this incredible chance to be in Toulouse for a month as part of my PhD project that explores the visual representation of the gods in 4th century Latin poetry. So Latin poetry is full of colorful appellatives, epithets for the gods. And the starting point of my thesis is that for an ancient reader of that time, these colorful images had a symbolic power. So they actually help them identify and conceive their gods rather than just decorating their descriptions. So for example, if I have Glaucus Neptunus, which is blue Neptune, this blue reminds the ancient reader of the fact that Neptune is a god connected to the sea, to water. For us, consequentially, these color terms become a tool to better understand how these ancient people conceived the divine and how in a polytheistic system. The question, what did colors mean in 4th century text, is particularly interesting to me because poetry in this age becomes one of really the battlefields between the representatives of an old classical culture and a new Christian one. It's the age of Constantine, when Christianity becomes the state religion of Rome. So on the one hand, we have conservative poets who keep talking about the colorful gods of classical tradition and also give great value to visual descriptiveness. That's one of the features really of the poetry of this time. And on the other, Christian poets who start opposing traditional imagery for the gods, and also the fact of raising admiration for these idols, they say, through visual description. So in some, the way in which traditional and Christian poets use colors for the divine mirrors a transition, a cultural transition from a polytheistic concept of the divine to a monotheistic one, from gods who are related to this world, a blue Neptune, god of the sea, to a transcendent god. Now, this comparison is very much the object of my thesis, but the first part of my project focuses on the colors of the traditional gods and on what they could mean to a 4th century reader. Of course, this question is very strictly connected to another broader question, which is, well, what is a god in a polytheistic mentality that we don't understand anymore? Toulouse is one of the most influential centers that study ancient polytheism. And until June 2023, they're hosting a project funded by the European Research Council called Mapping Ancient Polytheisms, and led by Professor Corinne Bonnet. MAP studies the appellatives of the gods as a way of understanding how people, specifically in the Greek and the Semitic world, conceived their divine forces. They're also building, here you have the website and the team, they're also building a database of inscriptions and also of literary works, and some tools such as web mapping tools, network analytics tools to support their research. Now, to understand a bit better the background of their research and what they do, let me indulge perhaps in this little activity. Let's try to imagine a god, an ancient god. I'm pretty sure that those of you who are familiar with ancient mythology would probably imagine, I don't know, a very beautiful woman holding an apple, perhaps, and this is Aphrodite, the goddess of love, or a man with a long white beard and a trident, Neptune, the god of the sea. Well, this is actually really an oversimplification, and it comes from our need as moderns, if I can say so, to find coherence into the polytheistic system of the ancient gods. If we look back at Jean-Pierre Vernant, one of the main historians of antiquity of the last century, well, we see that he looked at literature and at inscriptions and noticed that the ancient gods really do not look like individuals with a fixed sphere of agency, such as, I don't know, water or love. And it's very difficult to summarize them under one single label. They're actually complex beings that may overlap in their spheres of agency, and they are defined by their relationships with each other. So, for example, Aphrodite, of course, we imagine her as the goddess of love, but she was actually invoked by sailors to have safe travels by sea, even in a context of war, really. This is strange to our ears in some way. There may be a sort of overlapping here between the spheres of Venus and the god of war Mars and the god of the sea Neptune. How does this all work? So Vernant was acknowledging this complexity, but he ended up saying that the gods, well, are basically ways of acting. So they're not individuals, people with a defined sphere of agency, but ways of acting. So Aphrodite, for example, is the way of love. She's invoked by sailors because she is a pacifying goddess. So she pacifies the sea and then, of course, making it easy for the sailors to travel. And we can understand that this is a bit of a paradox. This idea reproposes the unity, the idea of the unity of a god, the idea of the label. So MAP is basically inheriting Vernant's idea that polytheism is a system of complex deities, but is trying really to avoid this tendency to find a unity, a coherence, yes, but not a unity, not the label. So their methodological approach is based on three, let's say, main principles. First of all, they collect the appellatives that the ancient people gave these gods. For example, I don't know, Poseidon, which is Neptune, the shaker of the earth. He's the one who is in charge of earthquakes and can prevent earthquakes then. They focalize on a specific geographical and chronological context, because like each community in the ancient Mediterranean organized their gods in a different way, or assigned different functions to each of their gods in a different way from other communities, because they responded to different needs. And finally, they understand polytheism is the third methodological point, as a network. So each god is actually seen as a multiplicity of attributes without a clearly defined center, a clearly defined unity. And these attributes are all in relationship with the attributes of the other gods. So there may be overlaps between the attributes of the different gods. There may be oppositions. There can be hierarchical relationships that we can see. Now, I wanted to connect with Toulouse because this approach resonates quite well with what I'm finding about color qualifiers for the gods in 4th century poetry, starting from the very idea that an epithet, in my case of color, reveals something about the divine power. And indeed, if we look at the database of the project, they have color terms inserted in there. And there is actually one professor in Toulouse, Professor Adeline Grand-Clément. She's one of the greatest experts really in the interpretation of visual qualifiers for the gods, for the ancient gods. So through like conversation with Adeline and through the database, I was able to trace back the history and the meaning of these epithets of color, and also to compare inscriptions with poetry to see whether there's a connection. The second reason for me to be there was also to better understand how they apply the concept of network to polytheism, and not just ancient, but also like modern kinds of polytheism, and how to personalize the network analytics tool that they are presenting every year at a spring school that I've never been able to attend. So in what exactly does the network as a concept and as a visualization tool end up coming to help my research? Well, first of all, in the identification of the single deity. here you see this is a network that I created on Gephi following the instructions and the training that I received in Toulouse. You will see all the gods on the one side, and on the other side all the color terms connected to the gods. So we can see that basically each deity is associated to a multiplicity of color and light effects. This means that these color and light effects have meanings. They symbolize a multiplicity of functions, really, or of attributes. Of course, well, the gods of literature are much more coherent individuals than the gods that we find in inscriptions on in cults, because they've been crystallized in a literary tradition. But still, we see really this composite character here. If we take, for example, I hope you can see it well, if we isolate Venus, we see that she is connected with terms for fire, so to burn, fire, aureus, gold, and then purple, and then literally the color of the roses. Why is Venus connected to fire? Because fire in ancient thought and in ancient literature represents erotic passion. Gold is an attractive metal, a metal that's precious, and Venus is connected to the sphere of attractiveness. This is the explanation that anthropologists give to this. And we can also see, if we look at the palettes again, we can see there are gods that can share. Well, we understand the relationships between the divine powers. We see that, for example, that gods can share certain colors, and this may well depend on the fact that these gods share the same sphere of agency. So if we isolate gold, aureus, we see that's connected with Venus, but also with Cupid. We know that Cupid is, in mythology, the son of Venus. He is the god that embodies erotic passion, so connecting it again to attractiveness. And then we have the sun. Why the sun? Well, gold is also a symbol of power in the ancient times. And for late antique readers and poets who were very well versed in astrology and Neoplatonic philosophy, the god is the king, really, of the planets and the ruler of life on Earth. So Cupid and Venus themselves are often represented with majestic attributes. So there is an idea of majesty here. There is also the fact that aureus contains a high degree of brightness, and Sol is a sky deity, so a bright one, and Cupid and Venus, especially in this period, are understood as sky deities as well, planets even. To conclude, well, what am I bringing here from this exchange? First of all, a stronger methodology for my research, new conceptual tools, but also some very important side skills. So the ability to use Gephi and QGIS, which is a web mapping tool. I received training on that there, and I'm talking with the Digital Humanities Research Centre here in Edinburgh about that. And then I was able to observe modes of divulgation and connection with contemporary discourses in Toulouse. I happened to be there during a cultural festival where some people in classics and from MAP organized talks in a very informal atmosphere, so typically at a coffee shop or as an aperitif. They were open to anyone, and they would bring a theme relatable to our times and discuss it with someone from another department or with an artist. And I would like really to conclude, well, first of all, thanking for the great opportunity, and then with probably a thought that I had, which is I realized going there how much learning is also a random process, not just a planned exchange of knowledge on a fixed topic, that as it tendentially happens when one meets in person and does not meet in person. So the benefits of this exchange for me stemmed also from randomly meeting a scholar that was studying exactly what I was finding difficult, or listening to the weekly meetings that they had and be struck by an association with my own work and then initiating a conversation. So thank you very much for your attention.